On the afternoon, there was, we had predictions for 2 days that there were going to be severe storms. I am not a storm-happy person. I grew up in northern Indiana where there were tornadoes a lot. I experienced some tornadoes. So when there's a storm warning, I either am in the basement or with friends who are not as afraid as I am. So because there was such warning, our office decided it would let everybody go home early so they could be safe. I didn't like that because then I would be by myself. But when everybody left, I didn't want to be there by myself, which was in Louisville. So I was driving home around 3:30 and heard on the radio, tornado has touched down 25 miles from Louisville. Didn't say where, just 25 miles from Louisville. So I didn't know whether I was driving to it, it was going to be chasing me from behind or from the side. And so I got home, by then sirens were going off. Got home, got to my safe place with my radio and flashlight and everything, and learned that it had hit in Henryville and various other places, Stacy Hill, and then skipped Louisville and went to West Liberty. So because my role, I work for the Metro United Way, because my role there when a disaster occurs is become the disaster manager, I went into disaster mode. I don't know whether you want me to keep talking or...
Yeah, what were your days, from that point?
So that, I guess a plus or minus for me and for our region, over the last 4 years, we had 3 major weather disasters. 2008, the tail end of Hurricane Ike, severe winds. January of 2009, severe ice storm. August of 2009, flash flood. So I had at the ready volunteer names and volunteer emails. So Friday night around 5 o'clock, I was able to access everybody via my computer and sent out an email to about 250 volunteers who had helped in the previous 3 disasters, saying, obviously a disaster has struck, we will need volunteers. I really don't know what I'm talking about, when or where, but I just want you to be on the ready and let me know if you're available. And immediately people responded and said, we're ready. One is an owner of a restaurant in Louisville and said, we're ready for our employees and we'll bring food, just tell us where. Kind of side, there's an organization of representatives from Clark, Floyd, and Harrison County of Indiana known as the Southern Indiana Community Organizations Active in Disaster, otherwise fondly known as SIN-COAD. So this group was formed after the windstorm, to really be prepared should another disaster happen. The agencies would know who each other are. We had gotten together and had some rather informal committees of volunteer recruitment in time of disaster, unmet needs, sheltering. And the role of a United Way after a disaster, a major disaster like this, is to open what's known as the Volunteer Reception Center. The Red Cross and Salvation Army are first responders. They have specific roles. And in the past history, volunteers would show up to help, but they would honestly be in the way. And of course, the agencies are nice and say, well, have you had the training? You've got to be trained. And for volunteer people who want to do something right away, saying I have to be trained is not necessarily well received. So the United Way role over the last probably 10 years nationally has been set up that volunteer reception center so you can be open as quickly as possible to marshal these volunteers out of the first responders hair into something productive. So my thought was, I wonder who's going to call me first. Will the emergency management person call me? I wasn't quite sure he had my phone number. He does now. But a representative from the Red Cross called at 7 o'clock that Saturday morning and said, how quickly can you get to the command center, which was in Hamburg. And so I was there by 8 o'clock and been moving ever since. And so we were fortunate to be part of the emergency command center, knowing everybody's kind of roles, the police, the state police, the fire, health department, Red Cross, Salvation Army, faith-based organizations, all have designated roles. They all have volunteers, and they all had assignments, and they needed somebody to do that coordination. And that's the role that the Metro United Way stepped in and took over. And
So how many volunteers did you train over the course of this disaster? How many ended up serving to your knowledge?
Well, our role was to get those who are interested in helping, had the desire, showed up on our doorstep. We initially had a location donated to us in Jeffersonville, an old car showroom, which was perfect because it had plenty of parking and plenty of indoor staging areas. And we were initially open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. And then when we got there at 7 a.m., people waiting in line to get in. We didn't really change till 6, even though people wanted us to, 6 a.m. that is. So our focus was to really help in kind of 3 stages. One, the initial cleanup, feeding, and warehouse. So I don't want to say you don't need training to do that, but you need more of an orientation. And we gave everybody kind of a safety drill, closed-toed shoes, in fields long pants, watch out for, always have gloves, gargles, masks, the reason why. But the actual training in order to be the volunteer was not what we did. So the initial from March, we opened March 4th. So from March 4th to maybe September, August, September, the major function was cleaning up debris. And I think that is something that the majority of people don't realize. They see a tornado, I want to go and help them rebuild their home. Well, rebuilding their home isn't something that's going to be happening the next day. And we had a lot of people come in, construction related, very willing, but we said, could you come back in September or October? So the major cleanup, the cleaning up, then moving that stuff somewhere, and in an area that March to Recovery covered, very rural. So it's not, I remember going to a presentation by the people in the know, county commissioners, disaster response, and saying, your stuff has to be divided on the road, wood stuff, aluminum stuff, then clothes and vegetation, leaves or something. So just bring them to your curb, and then the city people, county people will come by and clean up. And somebody raised their hand and they said, now, so you won't come on my property? No, I won't come on your property. Well, I live on a farm, and the road is 250 yards from my where my debris is. So I need a truck to bring it all up, and then I need a truck to divide it all. And the commissioners and the others hadn't even occurred, they're just thinking, I live kind of in the city, it's easy for me to bring stuff. So that was a hardship. Then we had to recruit trucks, So from the day from March 4th to today is June 13th, we've had 12,400 volunteers, which is an amazing amount. There are a lot of factors in that total that are amazing. One, we have been told that in other disasters, the volunteer center usually closes after the initial cleanup, 6 to 8 weeks, because people stop coming. For us, people have not stopped coming. We were a little concerned when we shifted from debris cleanup to actual construction that the skilled volunteers might not come. They have continued to come. We've had some groups that have been back 5 or 6 times. And these are groups who are not local. These are groups who've come from Illinois and Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. And so, an obvious question is, why? And I think it's a credit to the communities, the receptiveness of the people. Of course, some were and still are in shock. The readiness to, lend a helping hand. But I also think that the structure set in place early on by Metro United Way, by community volunteers coming in and saying, let me help with registration, let me help with training. Also, we moved 3 times from Jeffersonville, which was not close, 20 miles away, but we didn't want to be in the midst of all the hubbub. Then we moved to Henryville to a church location, which was recognized as kind of the place. They served food every day for the volunteers and the residents. So it was good for us to be where everybody was. Then the kids went back to school, and families, there wasn't the need for meals every day. And then we moved to the volunteer fire department here, which has been a blessing for us and for future disasters. I'm hoping that there is a volunteer fire department that we can say, we'd like to be your resident, your tenant. So I think the proven need, and also that we're well organized. Volunteers come in, we respect their time, we give them an orientation, show them kind of what happened, what happened originally, what has happened because of volunteers, and what they're going to accomplish while they're here. So and we celebrated when we reached the 5,000 volunteers and 10,000 volunteers. So I expect we might reach 15,000 before we're over.
So if you had to pick out 3 things that you have learned from this crisis, what would those 3 things be?
One, I was going to say, not to be, how can I put this in good English? Don't be afraid to ask. Ask people if they're willing to volunteer. Ask people willing to share their resources and skills. Provide, kind of housing for the volunteer center. So that's one thing. The second thing is realize that though I have been the disaster manager for 6 years, have had a variety of different experiences, have gone and helped, personally been a volunteer in other communities, that I'm not necessarily the expert. Be able to be receptive to people's advice. When we were in Jeffersonville, 20 miles away, there were a lot of angry people up in Henryville saying, "You're 20 miles away, people come here, we're not going to send them there." They didn't see it from our side, that we didn't want to be in the midst of a lot of chaos, but listening to them saying, we need you here so we can get back to our regular jobs. And so Then it was like the next meeting, I said, "But we're moving." Um, and I think for me, I'm not sure it's necessarily a lesson learned. It's a very positive, though I would not wish this sort of disaster on anyone. Lose homes, lose life, lose animals, lose that sense of safety and security. But a lot of good has come out of it. And though I had friends in Henryville before the tornado, I have a lot more now. And I can't imagine my life without this blessing of these friends and the experience. I mean, I have a lot of people that say to me, "You're still going to Henryville?" Like, you know, it's 100 miles away. And when this is all over, I'll miss it. I'll miss coming here. I was coming here every single day, 7 days a week. We have good staff running the volunteer center now, so I'm not here as often, and I miss it. And but I'll still have the friends and the good and the bad, the plus and the minus memories.
So another town is watching this, about the size of Henryville. What do you tell them about getting ready, how to prepare?
I think it's important that one of the strengths in response to any disaster is faith-based organizations. All the faith-based organizations kind of at the national level have disaster response groups. So I think for the local communities to, if they don't already have their faith-based know their faith-based organizations, have the faith-based organizations have somebody identified as their disaster point person, because if they don't, once a disaster strikes, the national people will be on their front doorsteps kind of telling them how it's going to work, as opposed to, you know, really kind of understanding the dynamics of the community. The experience that we had having community organizations active in disaster, which is the local affiliate of VOAD, Voluntary Organizations Active in Disaster, though we had really just kind of scratched the surface of being in operation. We had a meeting on Monday and talked about, we've been in existence for 2.5 years. We really should explore doing a mock disaster drill. Then we had one on Friday. So I think that's another, a lot of large cities you see on the news having mock disaster drills, more of a, you know, maybe chemical related or major automobile accident, which is all good and you need to prepare for that. But those type of disasters, the local neighbors, individuals really aren't that involved in. So to form a community organizations active in disasters, or the newest thing in 2013 is neighbors active in disasters. So if something happens in your neighborhood, you know, there's kind of like a neighborhood watch patrol. So you're able to check in on your neighbors, or somebody might be able to stockpile water in their basement, and somebody else might be able to stockpile a generator or something like that. So when a disaster happens, you'll be working in your neighborhoods and then to the community and then to the city. So I think, you know, getting to know one another, and today I heard that the current high school 16 to 22-year-olds in 20 years will not have any face-to-face communication skills because of all they do is text. So people looking at this 50 years from now, who knows what the technology is, but I hope there's still the ability to go and knock on your neighbor's door and say, "Hi, I'm Mary. I have water. Do you have a plug? Or do you have electricity?" So I think that's, you know, it's back to the kind of grassroots of how this country was formed. The neighbor helping neighbor, the barn raising, and we've had a lot of barns raised, and we have a lot of houses raised by the Amish and the Mennonite, major, faith-based. It's been a wonderful experience to really see the faith-based organizations working together. I knew that they did, but to see it firsthand, and I assume 50 years from now, they will still be intact in our communities. The quote is that we can accomplish anything if we don't care who gets the credit. And I think that the response in individuals, in organizations, whether it's volunteers, whether it's people off the street, people driving 2 hours to come and help, really goes to that quote. And another thing that I forgot is I talked about the organization and how the organization of the volunteer structure. Well, that was one piece, and I'd be remiss if I really didn't talk about what has become fondly known as March to Recovery. We had one of our early volunteers coin that as the kind of tagline for our recovery, and I learned later that a number of years ago a tornado struck in another part of the country on March 2nd, and they don't have that as their logo. They never even occurred to us. So now they're kind of copying us. But we had a lot of good advisors from other communities, from the state voluntary organizations active in disaster, the State Association of United Ways, really how to pull the community together to have a leadership component that can oversee the management of construction, of casework, of volunteer engagement. And so to anybody watching this, besides the volunteer coordination, you need that central body. And though we were very fortunate in who we recruited to be on that committee, there was a group of people who were doing the recruitment. It really needs to have some serious thought, though you're in the heat of the moment and people are going to be giving you money left and right. So how do we quickly organize? So that's a role of the kind of co-ad, to have maybe on the shelf a long-term recovery committee that you can activate some people right away and then build on that. But you really need somebody with strong financial background, community background, communications background. We are fortunate in our case management director and our construction director had done disaster response in other communities and decided to come here for 9 months to 2 years to help us. So that the steering committee for March to Recovery really became the advisory committee to what's policy setting, I guess. And the other thing is there are an awful lot of resources, and 50 years from now there'll be even more resources on how communities responded to disasters. We had a great toolkit from northern Indiana lake area from their flood response. So look for those tool books online, because it really, you don't have to start from scratch. So it's been a tremendous experience for me, learning experience, trying to share this with others, so that they can benefit from our success.